Welcome to the Spectators Podcast. Here are your hosts, Corey and Jeff.
Welcome, spectators, to episode 47 of the Spectators Podcast. My name is Jeff, and to my mic adjacent is the beautifully bearded Corey. How are you, my friend?
I am doing all right. It has been a boring week in the world of wrestling, I'd say. And although, with it being a boring week, I still think we have a ton of things to unpack this week.
We do. So I think this episode we'll talk about the WWE Draft, and then we'll do a bit of a backlash. Because believe it or not, this week we have a PLE, which doesn't feel like is about because the draft came up. So we'll talk about that as well. But before we get into it, please hit subscribe, give us a thumbs up, so YouTube will give us some money. I have children, please help me feed them. But before we get into WWE, there's something I did want to quickly touch on that's been a real big talking point on the IWC, this internet wrestling community, is what they call wrestling gatekeeping. I did really want to talk about it because AEW had their pre-sale today for Wembley. They sold about 36,000 tickets, which was fantastic. And lots of people came out to the woodwork to try and make that lesser than it is. Like WWE, for example, WWE released that they had about the same amount of tickets sold for SummerSlam, and everyone was celebrating it, right? There was no one trying to find negatives or create false stories about this, and that. Like, people just really want to see AEW fail, which I think is really sad because, this is actually really good for wrestling if you think about it. A second company outside of WWE was able to get that many people in a foreign country to watch a wrestling show, right? That's actually really good for wrestling in general, right? Because it's going to increase the options for people to go to a show and give you better options for wrestling. So I was just quite annoyed at the internet wrestling community today because they just really wanted to shoot down, which I think is actually a really good thing for wrestling today.
Yeah, I think the ability to have options is huge, right? I think the WWE product has been so, and we talked about this probably last year, the WWE product has been so in your face, mid. it has been the only, option for people, despite that there is, Impact and AAA and New Japan and stuff like that. These just aren't the same. They're not at the same level to compete with WWE, and I don't think they ever would be. They would never get there.
And JPW is trying. Like they're now really getting into North America, like specifically in the US, and they are doing well. And I think that's why they signed someone like Mercedes Moné. They're really trying to sort of get back. It was an interesting interview actually with someone involved in JPW, and they said like the pandemic really screwed with them. Like it really messed with their product, so they weren't able to get their footing and make themselves bigger. But now they're out of that, and they're a bit more encouraged to spend money. So we might see a few more shows in North America, and then potentially signing big stars like someone like Mercedes.
Yeah, definitely, and I think we do see the odd talent go to Impact and things as well, right? But I don't think there's ever really been anything that's competed heavily with WWE since the 90s, and that puts a little bit of it's kind of set a precedent for wrestling over the last 20, 30 years, right? It's kind of been the same product. There's not been, everybody's trying to emulate WWE rather than compete with it and create a competitive product that shows difference. Whereas AEW, when they started out, they were very different from WWE. The management was different. The style of the shows was different. It started out with a very indie feeling. Of course, at this point, it's getting up there. It's scaling, and it's becoming, they're putting more money into the shows, the camera work, the crews, the the pyro, all sorts of things, right? And it's becoming a pretty big brand, but it's not quite at the level of competing directly with WWE. But you do have, still those long-term WWE fans that seemingly want AEW to fail, and I don't quite get this because
and I don't get it either. No.
If you have a product that is competing with WWE, if you have a product that can sell, let's say they do sell 80,000 or 90,000 seats for Wembley, that's actually amazing because no other wrestling promotion has able to pull off something like WrestleMania, and that would be WrestleMania level seating, right?
Attendance, yeah.
So if you can do something like that, you're starting to get up there to the point where you're competing directly with WWE. And if that's the case, that means WWE has no choice but to step up their game, right? Mm-hmm. So with competition, you're going to have better product from the product you like anyways. No one's forcing you to like AEW. No one's forcing anyone to like AEW. No one's forcing anyone to like WWE. This whole internet wrestling community war between the two brands of, AEW fans don't like WWE and WWE fans don't like AEW. If you're a fan of wrestling, you're just going to watch, I've watched crappy ROH shows that have no production value. I have watched crappy TNA back in the day and Impact shows now that just don't have the same level of production that these two brands have. But it comes down to the talent and the stories, and not only the stories backstage, but the stories that happen in the ring, how well they can storytell throughout a match. And those wrestlers will move to WWE, they'll move to AEW, they'll move around, and so on. But competition's only going to create a fire under every brand to do better, right?
Yeah.
So I have no problem with it. I'm actually really happy about it. For all the naysayers out there, watch an AEW match before you decide to talk about it.
Or just like what you like. Like wrestling
like what you like. It's okay.
Wrestling is subjective in itself, right? Like some people love Roman Reigns, some people don't love Roman Reigns, some people love Cody Rhodes. They or people like I said, people like AEW, like WWE. There is no shame in liking both or liking one or the other.
And to that point, we're going back to almost we're starting a new era in wrestling in WWE. Mm-hmm. We're starting a new era. We're moving out of the PG era. We're moving to a new era. We don't know what it's called yet, but we're moving into a new era. And we're going back to a structure where we're going to have two shows that are solid on their own. And for all we'll see in the next coming months, we'll see people who are Raw fans that don't like SmackDown and SmackDown fans that don't like Raw. And this internal competition between brands is actually what's going to make WWE, hopefully, in theory, better, because you're going to have competing brands, which I think we lost out a lot over the last few years, especially on a big event like Survivor Series. You can't really have the opportunity to showcase the brands and showcase the talent. Nothing's better than having a world heavyweight champion face the WWE champion and showing who's really the top dog in the WWE. In this case, we all know Roman's going to take the pin, but at the end of the day, it creates better product and it creates a fun environment where I do see at some point. I mean, we'll get into it when we talk about the draft, but I don't know if you agree with me here, but I think it makes sense that you'll probably will see people lean towards liking one brand over the other, just based on how
especially with the draft
has gone.
Yeah, especially with the folks that got moved to, and the call-ups too. So I think that's actually a good transition. My main message is like what you like. Don't hate on people for liking a certain brand over the other, right? It's wrestling. It's a subjective art to begin with. And good on AEW for taking that risk. And I think even if they still only sell 35,000, that's the largest they've ever done. So, good for them, right? I think it was $400,000 to sell Wembley, and they made well over that today. So anyways, good for AEW. Like what you like. So moving into the draft, I think it's surprisingly a bit bigger than the Premium Live event they have coming on in a different country this coming weekend. it was interesting. We decided to wait a little bit actually to see how the draft was going to unfold, and I'm glad we did because there was quite some interesting things that happened. So I'll get your overall thoughts on the draft first, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the topics, which is who was drafted where, the call ups, and I think for me some of the overall what I feel is lacking, and what would have made this a really good draft. But anyways, we'll get into those specificities. I can speak English. So what are your overall thoughts on the presentation, how they did it each show, and the draft itself?
Well, a different feel from what we've seen before with drafts, right? There's no general managers, which I think we both kind of thought, and I think a lot of people thought about this being a little bit as an anomaly because we wouldn't have seen this in previous years. I like the approach they took where they had different people kind of come out and announce those, but then again, those people are not involved apart from Shawn Michaels with the rosters, right? Mm-hmm. I think we have to start this out by saying that the most important thing here that made the draft what it is, that's going to continue to make these transitions important or relevant, is that World Heavyweight Championship. Before we knew what the draft was going to be, we knew that title was going to be in addition to the titles that are already on the roster, and it was going to go to the show that Roman Reigns inevitably does not get drafted to. We didn't know at the point where he was going. We had a lot of speculation, but we didn't know, and now we know the brand who's receiving the belt, and I think that made it really exciting because you kind of found that out first night. We'll talk about that shortly, but that creates new competition. We're talking about so much about competition. We're talking about showcasing talent. This is an opportunity that we know we can showcase talent. And the nice part is you have a chance to showcase some talent on a brand that you didn't necessarily get the chance to before because you have some people who've swapped over and they moved into different brands. We can have people face each other that probably haven't faced each other in many years or have never faced each other before, which is fantastic because we need this kind of feud. We need this kind of storyline refresh going forward because we've had a lot of the same redundancy for a while. I don't know where to go in this conversation other than saying, there were some things in the first night of the draft, which was SmackDown's night of the draft on Friday last week, that were surprising to me. But I felt like that draft night really lacked excitement. There wasn't a lot of excitement coming out of the picks that were chosen. And there were some things that happened that kind of surprised me. So I guess, let's just start off by saying congratulations to Paul Heyman because he was drafted first overall in the WWE Draft.
That's true.
His name went first. Solo Sikoa was the number 2 draft pick in the draft, and Roman took, oddly enough, 3rd draft pick. So so I just wanted to congratulate Paul Heyman. I don't know why they drafted Paul Heyman, but okay, he's obviously just gonna follow Roman. I thought there was a little bit too much given away from WWE in the beginning. If you look on their website before, they were already saying who was eligible that night. Right. Triple H also showed who was eligible. You kind of lost the allure of the draft at that point when
That's a good point, actually.
Who was eligible. Because when we discussed this a little bit after we saw those things posted on WWE's website, and honestly, before we even got to that Friday night SmackDown where they started the draft, I lost a little bit of interest in the draft because I knew...
You knew Cody and Roman were going to be split.
I knew also who could potentially be drafted at what point, and they kind of give you a little bit more idea by knowing who's eligible and what's happening. I think anybody should have been eligible at any point. There shouldn't have been anything given away. There would have been more surprise that way. So I think you really lacked surprise when you knew Roman was going to go on Friday. But what if you didn't know if he was going to go on Friday or Monday? And if he could have gone on Monday, that your anticipation to find out where he was going would have been a lot higher. You would have increased you probably would have increased your ratings because you would have gotten excited to say, oh, I don't know who's going to go where and when are they going to go. And they also did some things where for weeks Triple H had talked about, anything can happen in the draft. Anything can happen. People could get split up. Announcers could be involved. No, none of that happened. No announcers were involved. No officials were involved.
Except Samantha Irvin did actually move to Raw.
Okay. So there was somebody. However, no tag teams were split.
Yeah, they threatened the Usos, but that never happened.
But
that's
no
a faction.
Split, and there was that
right.
speculation that factions could split, tags could split. Only a couple weeks prior to that, the Street Profits were backstage, and they did a segment saying one could get drafted to Raw and one could get drafted to SmackDown. And then we find out days before SmackDown that there was package deals. Judgment Day was together. The Bloodline was together. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. But the tag teams were all together, including Alpha Academy, which I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, Otis, he could go with MMM, and no, that hype over the last few weeks was all broken up.
Yeah,
which I thought was bizarre. So we'll move into the next thing, and that has to be
just quick. I think the two things that were lacking for me is one, what you brought up, and that everything was kind of predictable. Yes, there are people move that we didn't expect, like Belair and SmackDown.
And call-ups were a little more surprising, but
yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Get to that, yeah.
But I for me, what is lacking? If you want like this is what is lacking is the GMs, right? And the presentation, like you talked about, how it looks like in years past they had the stars sitting in the back, waiting to get the like this you saw for the NXT folks, right? Like they were all sitting. It was
almost like the stars themselves were surprised about where they were going. In previous years.
Their whole idea was to match it to the NFL draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my guess was to have it as closely like looking like a legitimate draft than that the NFL was doing, right? And in any draft, you have all of the talent sitting, waiting for themselves to be drafted, right? And that just didn't happen. It was like they go up on a screen and that's it. Like you move on.
I'll give you the worst example of it. I'll give you the worst example I could possibly see that happened on Friday Night SmackDown. To your point, everybody clearly knew where they were going, right? There was no surprise. They've done the draft properly in the past where they have done that, where people have been in the back, and they've been surprised. Wrestlers have been angry that they've had to leave one brand to go to the other. The one example of what you're saying is the Street Profits typically wear the color of the brand they're going to be on when they fight that day, and they already were prepared with blue. So like it's like, if they were wearing gold or they were wearing black and gold or something that was like separate to the idea of where they were going, that's surprising. But they were wearing blue, and you're just like, okay, there's just no fun to it.
It's just the stakes. They're just the stakes of a draft weren't there for me, right? Like especially because how much they talked it up, how much they spent time on each show having wrestlers talk about it, and like you said too, so that's what bothered me. Like it didn't feel like a legit draft, and I know it's a kayfabe thing. I know it's not real, but like they wanted it to be real, right?
And they did a poor job at it.
And like they lined it up with the NFL draft for that reason, right? Why else would you match it up, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to me. So I feel like they were severely lacking in the presentation they were giving us of like, this is going to be the game changer, right? Yes, we got the World Heavyweight Championship. That is a game changer for sure. But it lacked just that presentation they were selling us. And I think for me, what's just still lacking is the GMs. Like it makes no sense to me, right? Like, okay, we've got brand splits now, and who knows? Things could change. Like we could be wrong here. We'll eat some crow that they will put in GMs, but like it doesn't. The brand split doesn't make sense to me if there's no head of that brand, right?
There's no one fighting for that brand,
Yeah, like it's just you're assigned. This is your assigned brand. You stay there. Like that's just what it is. Like, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, right? Like, it doesn't make me like, oh, I really want to see Raw because I want to see what they're going to do. Oh, I really want to see Smack. Like I want to watch both shows still, right? But nothing's pulling me to say like, oh, I really want to see SmackDown because I want to see how they're going to respond to Raw. Like, these things, like all of that, right? Like, it just seems like a necessary evil, or just like it's just a checkbox for them. Like it lacks for me. Like I was excited for it. It just kind of fell flat for me. Like it was a lot less than what I thought it was going to be.
No, I agree. It fell really flat for me too. but I just thought about something that made me laugh during, I think it happened on SmackDown. It might have been on Raw, but I don't know if you noticed, but one of the nights for one of the rounds, Adam Pearce was supposed to come out and announce picks. He was supposed to come out and announce picks, I believe, for SmackDown. And he was supposed to come out with Shawn Michaels. And for some odd reason, midway through Shawn Michaels' picks, he said, well, I guess Adam Pearce isn't coming out, so I have to do this by myself and announce SmackDown picks as well. So I wondered, like, what disconnect happened there where he wasn't coming out, because it's clear to me that based on Monday Night Raw that Adam Pearce is still going to be the official for both shows. He's still going to be the guy that's the head guy. Your dream of having Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville is not happening because they were drafted. However, we did get to see Teddy Long there, and we did get to see Eric Bischoff there, which was a nice little piece to it. But seeing them both there almost bothered me more, because I was like, those make me remember the days when we had like the general manager system, and we were lacking it. It really fell flat because the presentation of it and the lack of excitement, because there was a lack of surprise, those two things go hand in hand. Then you top it off with not having like representatives for each brand that are true representatives. It's like, why are we doing this? Why are we splitting the brands? Because we're just going to get to the point where we hit Survivor Series in November, and we're going to have the Bloodline face the Judgment Day. Like, that's all it's going to be. It's not going to be in War Games, and it's not going to be like a true like Raw versus SmackDown situation.
Yeah, and that's the thing. This whole thing just felt like it just wasn't fully thought out, right? Like, they had this great idea of a draft, right? Like, and I didn't like the idea that the rosters, aren't set till next week, but it actually makes sense because, like, had NXT tonight,
Backlash, and
right. You had the NXT where people can say goodbye and stuff. So I get that. That actually makes a lot of sense now. But it didn't seem like, it seems like they had an idea, and they just kind of went at it first step and then didn't go any further than that and think some of these things through. Like, I think a GM is a big thing. And again, they could change things. I don't know. The sense I'm getting is that there's more to come on the 8th, which is the Monday after Backlash. Like, we're missing some stuff. Like, I was reading that there might even be more call-ups. I don't know. So, like, I think, like, the sense I'm getting is that there is still some stuff we're missing that they want to establish on the 8th, because the 8th will be the first day of the full rosters being developed, right? Like, that's it. The brand split's in. So we'll see. Like, we'll see. Again, like, the stuff that we're saying that was lacking, and the actual draft part might be made up on the 8th. But still, to me, they didn't deliver on the draft. I think it was a bit of a disappointment.
A lack of delivery, a lack of excitement, and poor execution have been a common theme this last year.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Well, yeah, especially when Vince came back. Like, I would say, like, H, it didn't exist with H, don't get me wrong, but it was few and far between.
Vince. Yeah, it's worth it.
Because it's what we talked about last time. Or in our previous, it's they're fighting each other, right? Like, I really get the sense that it's a tug and pull between Vince and H, and it's just, I don't think H had
to do that.
Yeah, I don't think Vince got involved with the draft. I think he actually left that one for H. But we'll see. Like we'll see as it moves forward what that looks like, right? And my biggest question is, will this brand split even thick, right?
Will like, it really the one even thing matter?
Well, we have free agents, right? I don't know if you want to get into the free agents now or be it.
Let's just jump into it now, because it's a weird thing that I don't think we've.
So I'll list the free agents.
I don't think it's something we've seen really specifically in previous drafts, and the first time. On the Friday, there was just some free agents that were just announced, right? And then on Monday, Brock Lesnar had negotiated his way into a free agent.
So did Omos as well, actually. Yeah. That he negotiated it. So here's the list. So you got Baron Corbin, Brock Lesnar, Dolph Ziggler, Mustafa Ali, Omos, and MVP, Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander, Elias, and then the two call-ups, Von Wagner and Zion Quinn. So those are your free agents. Which NXT call-ups were technically called, like, they were drafted as free agents, if that makes sense, which it doesn't, because drafts, you can't do that in drafts. But so this is where, like, this is another one where it bothers me a little bit of, like, hey, you want to do a brand split, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 superstars who are allowed to just go to each brand.
Can you refresh me on that list? And was there any female superstars on that list of free agents?
No, all men.
Interesting. Just thought I'd point that out.
Doesn't surprise me. Look at the NXT call-ups, right? Like, they were all tag teams, right? And again, well, no, there's Zoe Stark and Indy Hartwell, so I shouldn't say that. But anyways,
one thing I also want to point out about the call-up, or sorry, not the call-ups, the free agents, which is interesting to me, is you do have a couple of guys that make sense to be free agents. Brock Lesnar, of course, makes sense to be free agent because he's a part-timer and because they need him to build. Brock isn't going to be a guy that's going to have long-term feuds. He's someone who's going to go in to help sell tickets and to help build a feud up, right?
Well, like Cody, right?
Yeah. So you to be fair with someone like Brock, it's okay. I don't mind him being on either brand to get in a feud with somebody, and he just shows up whenever. However, Omos being another guy where the guy can't work with everybody. He's lacking a lot, that he's not very versatile. He comes out, he's having a feud with Seth Rollins, and the guy is doing the same thing he does every time. He fights jobbers for 6 weeks before he does the match, right? So a guy like that, you understand why he's a free agent, because he's never going to have a real feud with somebody. The most feud he's ever had was with Bobby Lashley, and that was actually not that bad. But then all of a sudden, they decided to play him as a guy that squashes jobbers. The one that I really feel unusual about is Elias. And that's why you make him a free agent. What necessity do you have to make the guy a free agent? He is not a pull right now. He's not a draw right now. You've messed him up, honestly, since he's been back as Elias. Is it my wonder with some of these free agents is it an excuse for them to do releases later on, right? You don't get too attached to them being in a certain brand, and it's more easy for them to be released at some point.
Especially the NXT calls, right? Like, I thought that was really interesting. Like, those two specifically, I know Von Wagner. I think he's 21. I could be wrong. He's young. And WWE is quite high on him, apparently. But like, why not just keep him at NXT, right? Like, if you're just gonna have him
and you just have him as a free agent, kind of floating around.
Who knows, right?
And they had something going with Rick Boogs and Elias, so I don't understand what the point of having him floating around as a. That's why I suspect releases are coming, and within the Endeavor acquisition, like, it does make sense that potential releases are going to come down the line, whoever that is, but leave them in the free agent spot because it's easy to release people. I
just don't know why they wouldn't. They just I complete like. Brock Lesnar, I think, should be the only free agent. I think everybody should have been drafted to a brand. Like, I don't get it. Maybe maybe if they're a free agent, they can at some point sign with the brand. Again, you don't have GM, so this is hard to establish. Like, it's one of these things that they thought of it, but I just think they had the original idea but didn't follow through with it, because H was really telling us that, like, he wants that brand split, but now you have these 10 people who can go to either one.
There's one simple answer for Brock Lesnar. Let's be honest. If you want to have Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns again, you can, right? He's a free agent. You can. And then if you want,
not, because he can't challenge for the belts. But yeah,
it's WWE. Anything can happen, really.
That's true. Yeah, they ignore
they
ignore these
it
things.
and just have him go in at any point. And then on the flip side of that, if you really, you see somebody who does become World Heavyweight Champion, and it's just not working, right? Because, Vince has his moments where he thinks things are not working. And then you'll just see Brock Lesnar go in and squash match, and then he'll be the new World Heavyweight Champion. Because they want that flexibility with Brock. They want him to be a champion again. I have no problem with it if it's the right timing. But, they just want to have that ability. So I understand Brock Lesnar should really be the only one.
Well, yeah, I agree. Like, I think he has the pedigree. Actually, I was surprised Trish was drafted. Actually,
I was really surprised about that too, because Lita didn't get drafted, and I understand she's hurt, but
yeah. That's why I thought to just keep her as a free agent.
I wonder if the suspect there is that she potentially wins another title.
That's the rumor that she's going to go after it. But yeah, I was surprised she was drafted. So I think instead maybe of going through each draft pick of each brand, let's go to SmackDown.
Sure.
And what did you like? What were some of your like meh of the people who were drafted to SmackDown? I have the list if you'd like me to read it off.
I remember. I would say I want to start with saying I didn't understand why they had Roman Reigns, Solo Sikoa, Paul Heyman as one package and the Usos as a separate package for them to ultimately just be drafted all together to SmackDown.
Same show. Yeah.
Stupid. Just dumb. Like, why are you advertising it that way? Because there had to be the option that, oh, the Usos are probably going to go to Raw, but it's just WWE getting in our face again and being like, ha, you thought they were going to be split up, but they weren't. Well, okay. Dumb.
Yeah,
so that was
especially because they lost a tag match on Friday. Too.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
No repercussions, really, again. But to my suspect is this is, it's one of those things where I'm just like, it's kind of annoying at this point. It's redundant. And it just shows me that Roman is going to keep the title for 1,500 days because they need all the bloodline there because Roman can't do it himself. It just kind of solidifies that to me. But that was that's my biggest gripe, I would say.
Yeah. I think I really like what they've done with the women's division on each show. I think they balanced it
out really well.
They balanced it quite nicely. I am a little bit irked that they kept Asuka, Bianca, and Damage Control all in the same show.
Me too.
We've seen them feud with each other for 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
There are some call-ups now, so maybe they can feud with them.
But they kept Charlotte Flair on SmackDown, which means that we could potentially have Charlotte Flair and Bianca face off against each other. We could also have Asuka and Charlotte Flair face off against each other, which they've had 10 out of 10 matches in the past. Yeah. There was some really good balance there. I will agree with you. It was something that I wanted to call on. I think, and I don't know if I'm right here, but I feel like they're starting to balance out the tag divisions. And
that was a big one.
I feel good about it. Ronda and Baszler got drafted to Raw, which will flip things around.
Well, I think they were working hard on the women's side and the men's side, to be honest, to build 2 tag divisions for both brands, right?
Yeah.
That's actually why I was surprised, but they called up the NXT champions, and I can't remember the other 2 NXT tag teams, but they're both like solidified tag teams, which you don't have a lot in WWE right now for the women's side. But now we have more than I think we've had in a while, right? Like you have Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville, tag champs, of course, Shayna and Ronda. You got the 2 call-ups, right? Like, I'm just trying to think who else. Nikki and Piper have a history, right? And they can actually create a faction with Isla and Alba, because they're all, if they're all from Scotland or that area.
You still got Damage Control as an option too.
Damage Control. So like I really like the women's side. Like I think it was balanced. Like there's a good options for both top champion to have good feuds, right? I love how they got Becky and Rhea on the same program. That'll be really nice. Yeah, it's probably not going to be a SummerSlam. It could potentially be a WrestleMania. I don't know. I see Rhea being poised for quite a long title run, especially because they made her the first pick on Raw, right? Like that was
I think Bianca's more likely to lose her title sooner than Rhea at this point in her title run. I think what they were saying, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I do believe what they were saying is Asuka's being drafted to SmackDown for the first time. I think she's always been a Raw brand. I don't think Asuka's ever won the SmackDown's women's title.
I didn't know that. Okay, well there you go.
I think that's why.
The rumor is though they're taking the brand name away from the women's titles.
Yeah.
So which because apparently there's going to be the past if the champions have switched, they've done a title switch.
Yeah, they've just handed each other the titles, which is what I think everyone suspected. And Bianca kind of messed up when she had her she had that promo over Instagram in her hotel room because she said, "I'm so excited to be the SmackDown Women's Champion," even though she's still carrying the Raw Women's Championship. How would you feel if they named it similarly, like the Women's Universal Champion and the Women's Heavyweight Champion, something like that? So it creates credibility. I like that idea too, and it doesn't have to be the same names. I just mean something that's not the SmackDown Women's Championship and the Raw Women's Championship. Yeah, I hope they get a redesign too.
Yeah, me too. Like they need it. Like they look so bland, right? And I think like you just keep the championships the way they are for Roman, and hopefully you can do the redesign of those belts and of course the tag belts, because I do suspect they want to split them. Because again, you have KO and Sammy who can go to both shows if they want.
They said no, is what I heard. I thought they said that they're designated to Raw only. So that maybe
they're gonna have to split the belts then.
They're either gonna have to split the belts or they're gonna fuse the belts. They're going to have one belt on Raw, and then maybe they'll create a second one for SmackDown. I wouldn't be opposed to that. I think that's totally fine. I even think, honestly, like if we're talking logically down the road, like let's say you have world titles on Raw with tag team titles, world tag team titles, because I think that's the theme they want to go with, right? World Heavyweight Championship, world tag team titles. If you do that, you can brand those to be world titles. They don't have to be Raw titles, because and
they can move.
What do you call it? In situations where you have maybe Money in the Bank, or you have trades, or you have Royal Rumble, those belts can move, and it doesn't matter which brand they're on. So
they're not branded, yeah.
So even with Roman's titles, like I wouldn't be opposed to, logically down the road, I wouldn't be opposed to those belts fusing to one, and that belt being like the undisputed championship, something like that.
Well, I do think whenever they decide Roman's done, like they're gonna scrap those belts. They're gonna keep the WWE Championship and redo.
They'll probably have a redesign, and it'll be like the WWE title, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because that one apparently has quite the lineage, the WWE Championship, whereas Universal, obviously, like it's only 10 years old, right?
They can't scrap the WWE title, I don't think.
Yeah. So that eventually they're gonna do that, and I do think they're gonna do. The tag titles, they're going to rename them, and hopefully they are going to rename them. It's again like a nice refresh, and again I think that's the stuff I think we're
WWE
missing.
Women's title and a world title, WWE world title. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, and then
two potential tag teams for women too could be an option.
Well, that's what we're looking at, right? Because Alba Fry and Isla Dawn won tonight, and they said they're going to defend the belts on SmackDown and on NXT. Which would make two sets of tag team belts on both brands for the first time ever, which is kind of exciting.
It's like a pilot almost, if you look at it.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't mind it, but like the idea is that again, it's brand split, right? So you don't necessarily ideally you don't want your SmackDown tag champs going down to NXT because you want a brand split,
and
right?
You want NXT Tag Team Championships because they've had quite the lineage down there as well. So you want to have those titles eventually going back down to NXT.
So we'll see what they do
here. Yeah,
we'll see what they do there because Indy Hartwell vacated her title.
Vacated her title, yeah.
So I think that's the last thing I'll touch on before we move on to Backlash. Is the call-ups. There were a lot of them, 18. I don't know.
Can I bring up one point before we jump into that?
Yeah, sure.
I just want to gain your perspective on this. And we talked about this a little bit before we went into the draft, so I want to think about this. And that's Cody Rhodes, where he sits now, right? I think
it's a massive one.
I think this is a big one. You had the opportunity where I think we both kind of thought we were kind of.
Hold on. Can we save this for Backlash? Because I think this sort of meshes into his match with Brock.
Sure. Yeah.
That trip goes with.
I'll try to remember my point there.
We'll pause it. So NXT call-ups. I think that to me, I thought there would only be a handful. I mean, all they said was on the promo was select NXT superstars. 18 superstars later, we have quite the refresh of the roster that I think, like on the positive side of the draft, like I think the goal of a refresh I think was completely achieved. You got people switching brands, and you've got quite the influx of talent, right? You have Pretty Deadly, Zoe Stark, Indy Hartwell. Trying to think of I don't know the name of Jinder Mahal's faction. Quite a few call-ups that I think will really help with new feuds, new mid card feuds. Even on Raw, you have some new world champ like JD McDonough. He could just whatever throw him into the top card, see how he does. Right? You've got so many more options now for that. Right? Same thing with SmackDown. You have many more options for people to lose to Roman. But I think for me what was surprising, and again, we might get more. It might change next week, but like the lack of some of the call ups. No Cora Jade, no Roxanne Perez, and no Braun Breaker. I think those were 3 surprise ones. We almost didn't get Grayson Waller, but he did go up to SmackDown.
Surprising you'd get Grayson Waller before you get Braun Breaker. That's just my opinion. I thought it was a little odd.
No, I was surprised at some of the call ups. They Odyssey Jones. I didn't know who that was.
I didn't know who it was either.
So
I was a little surprised about Indy Hartwell too, because she had just won her title. But I guess it makes sense because she's injured. She had to vacate the title anyways.
Well, and I think it's about that faction they had, the way.
Yeah.
And Candice and Indy can now tag, right? So that's
adding
helping
to that division too,
right? So like that's just going to help. So I guess I understand Indy from that perspective, but yeah, her getting drafted. First of all, on the show, like on the actual show, not on Raw Talk or SmackDown Lowdown, I think that's what it's called.
Like that, yeah.
So I mean, that was a bit of an odd choice. I guess I get it. But yeah, over Perez and Jade, I thought that was quite interesting. Because I feel like just for watching Roxanne's matches, she's definitely ready. Cora was injured for a while, so I can certainly see a reason for her to stay. And Breaker, he had a very long NXT championship run. I can't understand why they're keeping him there. He's heel now, so maybe they're just keeping him down there.
Keep him with Carmelo Hayes for a little bit longer. I don't know.
Yeah, he's gonna have a new feud as of this. Like I can't remember the guy's name, but yeah.
Then
I'm
it
not
doesn't
sure.
sound like he'll be coming up anytime soon. Then if they're gonna start so that's a bit bizarre.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think interesting in who they chose. On the other side, though, I think the goal was achieved: 18 new superstars internally that can really refresh these rosters and bring up some new feuds.
Well, I think the biggest and most important thing you got to look at is the bottom line here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at the top card, you have your top card who's kind of been consistent over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But you had a mid card now that's had a really successful year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you look at where the mid card is, you could potentially have the Gunthers, the Theories, those guys moving up now to the top of the card.
Exactly.
And now you have those call-ups and opportunities where you have options to build other talent, right? And you have those guys and girls who can move to the middle of the card. And especially, I mean, there isn't a mid card in the women's division. That might happen eventually, but for the men specifically, you got guys who are coming up who have the potential to beat Gunther. So we can now move Gunther up to the card, because I ultimately want to see Gunther face Roman Reigns. I do want to see Gunther face the World Heavyweight Championship. I do want to see Theory face Roman Reigns. Despite that they'll lose, you still want them at the upper card because you want to see how they'll do in that upper card, right? Mm-hmm. The nice thing is we know for a fact now those guys who were in that mid card that had to hold up Raw are going to move to the top card now.
Yeah.
Bobby Lashley's going to move to the top card. It's inevitable.
In SmackDown,
Rollins is going to move up to the top card, which is important. And Drew McIntyre is going to be back up at that top card. We don't really want to see Drew facing for the Intercontinental Championship. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. They just had to kind of do it because he lost to Roman Reigns and all of that. But now, I'd like to see him in the mix to face that championship, whoever wins. I think it's pretty well answered now that Seth Rollins is going to win that title, to be honest. But I don't even think it's up for discussion anymore. I think it kind of just they've painted the picture. I think we've all seen it now. And that's fine. I'm fine with that. The
great thing is like with the refresh, like if Drew won, would you be upset? I wouldn't
be upset with anybody winning, to be honest.
Yeah.
Not a single person. And I also don't mind anyone, like, I don't mind having a pre-prediction of Seth Rollins winning, because somebody like that is going to be a fighting champion who's not going to hold on to it for 2 years. They're going to lose it in probably 3 or 4 months, and this title's probably going to flip. They'll probably want to test this title out, have it flip around a few guys before they see who kind of solidifies as that World Heavyweight Championship.
Top, and that's the thing, is it's no longer who's the right person to beat Roman and when is the right moment. It's no, like, you can
Let's
have
see what
this
other
belt.
star could stand out.
This belt can be challenged at every pay-per-view, right? Whereas, like, we're not seeing Roman we haven't even seen Roman this entire month. Who knows? I don't even know.
They said the last time that Roman has interacted with the Bloodline was before WrestleMania.
Before WrestleMania, yeah, exactly. Let's not
go there.
Go too far down. Let's focus. Let's shift off the draft. It was an experience, but I think where it lacked execution, I think it made up in its goal in refreshing the roster.
It did.
So let's shift to the other important thing that WWE, in my opinion, did a terrible job of letting people know. We have a PLE this Saturday in San Juan, Puerto Rico, WWE Backlash. So I'm actually kind of curious. Last time we talked about Backlash, which was a year ago, when we started our podcast, you said you were very excited for the card. So how are you feeling about WWE Backlash this year, Corey?
I was really excited last year because we had banger after banger after banger listed for that card. And this year, I think I might fall asleep, and I'm really worried I'm gonna fall asleep during this card.
I'll be there to shake you awake.
You'll shake me awake, but it seems, and this is where I'll gripe a little bit here. This is probably the third, maybe even fourth PLE that I think Triple H's regime has really had a hard time building up and really getting us excited about it. And that's saying something, because you don't have enough build to make the pay-per-view compelling enough. Like, I hate to do this and compare, but I'm excited about AEW's next pay-per-view because they're doing a good job of building those feuds and building hype towards those matches, where I just don't feel that and haven't felt that way with WWE for several pay-per-views now, where I just feel like things are too rushed. They always have another priority on the horizon, like the draft.
Ahead.
Right? The draft was there. It was and then you got something else ahead. You got Night of Champions, which you're already thinking about, and it's only 3 weeks after. So it's kind of like, Puerto Rico is Backlash. It's kind of whatever. Okay, that was filler.
It's funny you bring up AEW, because I think this card is actually an AEW type PLE. At least some of the criticisms that I'm aware of with AEW, and that there's not a lot of story. It's just really good matches. If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. This is what this card is to me. The matches themselves look good, and I think they will be good.
Oh yeah.
However, the build has been terrible. And I have really, like, I kind of cared about Brock and Cody, but now I don't. Right? Like, the build, like, they did the same segment on Monday that they did 2 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Right, like, it's like the build, and again, like you said, it got muddled in the draft. We're really only focused about, I think, Night of Champions. Everyone, I think, is sort of overlooking this PLE, right? Because, right, like, lots changing after it, right? Monday after the roster pushes, right? It'll be the full brand split, right? So there's a lot of that. So let's go through it. We'll start with Lesnar and Cody and Rose, because I know you wanted to rant about Cody. So the floor is yours.
Well, this whole thing is becoming redundant. Yeah. And we're losing steam on Cody.
Oh, it's lost a massive amount of steam.
And this is, I think, what we were worried about with him potentially losing at WrestleMania. And I think our prediction has been correct. He has lost steam. No fault of his own. Still doing great work in the ring. But, he goes out for a promo to talk about Brock Lesnar, and I just don't feel it. I'm not behind him. It's not, and I don't mean that in, like, I don't want him to win. I do. But I'm just not, I'm not there, and I don't care about this match as much. I'm just like, you know what? I want to see it end. I want to see it get through it. I know it's probably going to be a 4 or 5 star match, because let's be honest, Brock does put on good matches. He's not one to put on
Cody.
He him himself. He's no slouch. Now, he held up all of Omos's 445 pounds during the WrestleMania match and actually made it half decent. Um, so I guess you have to be honest and say, like, it's not going to be a bad match. However, the steam's gone. I don't feel compelled to want to sit here and watch this match. What even made it worse was you keep talking about the story, and you've split Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns apart. Definitively. Neither of them is a free agent. And that means that they're going to be on their brand. So Roman and Cody probably will not interact whatsoever for a lengthy period of time until another draft potentially happens, right? Or Money in the Bank happens, or Raw Rumble happens. But regardless, this is going to be some time that this won't happen. Now, if he wins Money in the Bank, he has a whole year to cash in, right? So you could have him cash in technically in July of 2024. If you wanted to wait that long, you could have him cash in the same night and potentially win. You could have him cash in anytime. So he's got time. Or he could cash in on the World Heavyweight Championship because, they could go that direction. But if you don't have him win and say he does get into the mix of the World Heavyweight Championship, it does really feel like we went off on a tangent and we did decide that we don't really want to finish that story. And say he does get into the mix. He loses the World Heavyweight Championship. Like, he doesn't win the match. He doesn't win that title. He's just going to fall down the card. He's just gonna be a guy who's gonna face Gunther for his Intercontinental title. He'll hold on to the Intercontinental title, and then Cody's losing more and more steam as he falls further and further down the roster.
Yeah, now, I think he'd lose to Gunther.
I was gonna say, this isn't even me going for the other case scenario of him losing to Brock Lesnar, which is really gonna hurt his credibility. If he loses to Brock Lesnar, where do you even go next? Because I certainly don't want to hear the rest of the story because I'm done with it. And I've been one who's been cheering Cody Rhodes ever since day one of him coming back last year at WrestleMania. So, I don't know. I don't know how they thought this was the right idea. I don't understand how Triple H came out in that press conference and tried to validate the choice they made for Roman. It just seems like the WWE is Roman Reigns, and that's it. So I may get to a point where I may start watching SmackDown less or not as heavily as Raw because I'm gonna lose the lack. I'll lose my attention. Excuse me. I'll lose my attention span because I won't want to sit there and watch Roman Reigns pin everybody.
Yeah, no, it'll be hard for the big events, right? Like I know he'll be Night of Champions. And
coming down to it, your question, I don't know how I feel about Cody winning or not. I almost feel like based on his last few promos, he might lose this match. And I'm really worried about that.
And it'll continue his adversity. Because, it's not like he's been in the WWE for over 10 years. But he needs more.
He needs to win this match. He needs to win this match, to be honest. Like,
I think so, but I
don't
think
know if he will, but I'm saying that if you want to keep his steam going, you have to have him win this match.
Well, if they match the Cena story, he did beat Brock, I believe, right?
He did.
So I think that's what they're doing.
Stories, yeah.
They love them. They love to stroke their own ego. So I feel like I'm 60-40 on Cody winning. How about you?
50-50.
I think that's
fair. It's pretty low, but I don't have a definitive direction one way or another, so I almost feel like going into Backlash, I don't have any expectations. Even for any of the matches.
Yeah.
Even though some of them I think they already have a clear-cut winner, I still don't want to give any expectations because at this point, anything can happen, and I don't know if I want to trust the process.
Well, speaking of redundant, let's talk about the Bloodline match. That's
Let's not spend too much time on this one.
So Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, your unified tag team champions, and Matt Riddle versus the Usos and Solo Sikoa.
It's going to be a banger. Of course, all these guys always put on a great match. Can't argue that.
We have all main event people, right? Minus, I guess Jimmy hasn't main evented, but I guess Solo hasn't yet. But you do have pretty much like that.
He's not ready.
He's not ready. Well,
No.
Because he can never finish a goddamn match because they keep doing DQs. So how can a guy get ready?
A match. He's had more DQs in the last year than anybody's had in their whole career. So I feel like this match will be good, but I think it doesn't really matter who wins or loses because there's no repercussion either way. Like there's no tag titles on the line. There's no titles on the line. So really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The only repercussion is if they lose, Roman's going to potentially be angry. But I think that it just tells me that the Bloodline's winning, right? Because the tag titles aren't on the line. Yeah. So there's no risk for, having Sami and Solo and Riddle lose. They love to make Riddle lose. Let's be honest. So, I think it doesn't really matter. So it just makes sense for... the Usos win. They can redeem themselves with Roman, and the Bloodline will continue to protect Roman until Timbuktu.
See, I was gonna have the Usos and Solo win, but then the Usos lost the tag championships. I didn't the match. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't think they'd do that. Now there was no repercussions because the Usos just got drafted to SmackDown, anyways. However, if they continue down this path, I do see them losing, the Usos and Solo. Obviously, one of the Usos will take the pin. You can't pin Solo. And there may be some more repercussions. I don't know. Okay. That's the only way this match is going to matter to me. Because if they do win and there's no consequences, then I think I will throw up. Because we spent a year being invested in this goddamn storyline. And if they just go, nope, no consequences, even though we keep telling them, then I'm going to be very mad.
Here's a plot twist for you. I think it's viable. So I want you to hear me. I want everybody to hear me out here.
All right.
Who's been taking the pins since they've been losing?
Jay.
Nope. Jimmy.
Jimmy? Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess you're right, yeah.
Jimmy's been taking every single pin loss that they've lost every single match.
Oh, yeah, he took the pin on Friday. You're right.
He took the pin on Friday. He took the pin to lose the title or lose that rematch. Jimmy's the one who stayed loyal to Roman. Mm-hmm. Jay's the one who's kind of gone off. I think you could make things interesting and turn things around where you think that Jay's going to be the one to turn on Roman. Jay might get frustrated with Jimmy and actually have not a turn, but have some adversity with Jimmy. And Jimmy might get in trouble by Jay and Roman, where you really thought Jay was going to be the one that was going to get in trouble. Because Jimmy's been the guy who's losing the matches for them. It's not Jay. Jay's been stellar every time. He's almost won the match every time. The problem is Jimmy's taking the pinfalls. If he takes the pinfall again on Backlash, I think we might see something. I think we could see potentially, because I think the way that they're playing this out is it seems like Solo wants to take out the Usos. Like Paul's trying to get Solo to take out the Usos. So we might have like Solo take them out and like Jay.
Oh, at the end of the match, yeah, maybe.
And Jay not protect Jimmy because he's like, forget it, man. You like. And because you got to remember, Sammy's still kind of in his head a little bit, even though that storyline won't continue. It might still be like it's stuck in the back of his head. So it's possible that we might see it actually turn on Jimmy and not Jay. I've just been thinking about that lately because I've been watching that. I've been paying attention to that detail. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Bianca Belair versus Io Sky. Bianca's winning this one, you think?
This is going to be a good match. I'm actually looking forward to this.
It'll be a very good match. Yeah.
I'm excited that Io Sky is getting an opportunity. You could have Io Sky win, and the only reason I say this is because they both got drafted to the same brand, so it doesn't really matter. Whereas the Rhea and Zelina, that's a little more complicated. We'll get that in a second. But this one, she could. But I think it's just inevitably it's going to stay on Bianca a little bit longer. I think that they really see value in her.
With her title reign, you don't want her losing. In my opinion, on a show like Backlash, you'd have her lose at a SummerSlam or WrestleMania. Yeah. It's been on her for when she gets to Backlash that Saturday, she'll be the longest reigning Raw Women's Champion, which she's moving over to SmackDown after that. So that gets kind of complicated and interesting.
She
So
said
maybe you
she
could
wants
have
to be the longest reigning SmackDown champion. So yeah, I don't know how they'll put that in the record books, but
yeah. So we'll see how it goes. I do think it'd be a good match. We'll see how Damage Control, if there's some rifts, continue to be rifts there. We'll see. But that remains to be seen. We'll get into the other one then. Rhea Ripley versus Lena Vega, SmackDown Women's Champion.
No question in my mind that Rhea will win this match. You can't have her lose this title and then Zelina was drafted to SmackDown and then potentially bring the title back and then there's 2 titles on SmackDown. So I think just logically it doesn't make sense. On the flip side
Plus,
of that, why would you have Rhea lose so fast?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense. But
she's being pushed to the moon.
I think this is great for Zelina. I think it's great that she's going to get a match in Puerto Rico. And I think she's getting an opportunity to face one of the biggest stars in WWE right now and up and coming. Because I still see Rhea as she's really proving herself to be the best of the best. So I think Zelina getting this opportunity is just going to showcase her skills so that when she goes back to SmackDown, she can face Bianca. I think it's a fair call, right? I think having her be in that contention for the title shot is really good for her. So I think Rhea and her are going to put up a 5-star match. I've already seen some of the squabbles that they've had and the little interactions that they've had that, they're both selling each other very well. I think stylistically and chemistry wise, they're going to work together really well. But it's too obvious to me Rhea's going to bring back that title.
I just enjoy seeing Rhea sell DDTs. Good Lord.
Oh, I know, right? Her body is almost like straight, like perpendicular to the ring. And there's not a lot of people who can do that well, right?
Yeah.
Dolph Ziggler is one of them.
Yeah, there's actually a specific Twitter thread on Dolph Ziggler sells because he's so good at it.
He's so good at it.
Seth Rollins versus Omos. I have a hot take for this one, but I'll let you go first.
You have to have Seth Rollins win because you're putting him into the contention for the World Heavyweight Championship, and we all know that. You could argue that if Omos wins, he could be in contention for it, but I mean, Seth is a very small man in comparison to Omos. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a very interesting dynamic here versus him and Brock or him and Braun, him and Bobby Lashley. Like, he's had some matches with some colossal guys in the past. Seth is very small. Seth's agility is going to help him win this match, but I just think it's going to be a really interesting match. But I do want to hear your take on this because I'm not very interested in this match at all.
It's more about post backlash is my hot take. I think Seth will win. I think Seth will do some tremendous like Lesnar did some tremendous selling for Omos to make him seem like this big force. And I think because Night of Champions is in Saudi Arabia, Omos will be the next to fight Roman Reigns.
Really? So you think Omos will face Roman Reigns in Night of Champions?
Because they see Omos as this attraction, if that makes sense, right?
He's an Andre the Giant. He's an attraction.
So
yeah.
I think
good way to put it.
Roman's not losing at Night of Champions. It's a 1,000-day celebration. There's no way he's losing. So you got to put someone up against him, right? Why not Omos, right? Like they see him as this attraction. Casuals do want to see him in a match. Saudi Arabia love their giants. So I think
he could
Omos
get a title shot, which is a great accolade for him anyways.
I mean, Logan Paul got it, and he had 3 matches. So, I think it's for storyline, MVP, negotiates, you get a segment with the bloodline, and Omos faces Roman at Night of Champions, I think.
You want to make it really interesting, too? I like this theory. You want to make this really interesting. I almost feel like you have Omos squash Roman for the first little bit of the match. So it's like, oh my God, is Roman actually going to lose?
Yeah.
You freak him out. You freak out the people because you have Omos. You have to have Omos kind of, what do you call it? Dominate for part of the match. I think
Roman will sell that for sure.
So Roman will sell it, and you'll be like, "Oh my God, could this be the person that's going to dethrone Roman?" And then the Samoan Spike and it all happened. But you'll have a moment. You'll have a moment, I think, where he'll squash Roman a little bit, and you'll be like, "Wait a minute, this should be easy." So, especially for the Saudi Arabia crowd, they'll want to see that too. Right?
That's my hot take. Book it.
I like it. Book it.
Austin Theory, Bronson Reed, and Bobby Lashley for the United States champion.
This is a funny one because I actually thought this was initially going to go to Bronson Reed.
Me too.
I 100% doubt that at this point because now
Because he's in Raw?
Yeah, because he's on Raw. I think that's giving it away to me. He will lose, but he'll have a good enough match that now you can have him as a believable competitor for Gunther later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Theory is probably going to keep this right now.
I think with how it fell like with the draft, because you're not going to put it back on Lashley. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, because I think Lashley makes sense to move him up to Roman, right? They haven't faced each other. I think it makes a lot of sense. I don't mind Theory, going through the SmackDown roster a little bit too.
Well, we know who's taking the belts off Theory.
Who's that?
Solo Sikoa.
Oh, shoot, you're right. You're right.
At Night of Champions, I'm booking that one too.
Shoot, you're right. It's totally gonna happen. Yeah. I was gonna say maybe Sheamus will beat Theory, but you're right. It's gonna be Solo Sikoa. Jeez, Vince, if you're listening, book it now.
Oh, it's gonna happen. I
think so.
And actually, I do wonder if the Usos do get traded to Raw after Backlash if they lose. That's another thing.
If they lose, I think that has to be the stipulation is that they lose, right? If they don't lose, we're gonna see the Bloodline for this story go on a long time.
So yeah, I think it's Theory, and then I think Solo takes it off him at Night of Champions.
Fair.
So I left this one for last because I think it's going to be the best match, and it's actually the match I'm most excited for, which is Bad Bunny versus Damian Priest in a San Juan street fight.
Bad Bunny's so good in the ring for what he is. He's not a trained professional wrestler, but every time he's come up, he's shown that he can really have a great match. And I think for the Puerto Rican crowd, you have to have the guy win.
Well, and for me, like it's why I love it's a street fight. You're gonna get LWO out there. You're gonna get the Judgment Day out there, and they're gonna beat the crap out of each other, and it's gonna be fantastic. Like you're gonna have, because you know how Ray said he'll get the chancla out. I really hope he has one, and he beats Dom with it. Oh my god, that will make my night if that happens. But and funny enough,
go ahead.
Funny enough, they're actually pitching this to be the main event.
I wouldn't be surprised. It makes a lot of sense. Like Bad Bunny is so popular in Puerto Rico and across the world. Like he's the attraction here, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense for this to be the main event. If it's not, probably one of the women's titles matches will be the main event. But this is still going to be a big match, and I think it's going to be really funny. And I actually think it's going to be a banger of a match. Like I think it's going to be really exciting. If Bad Bunny loses, because I think the guy will lose. Like I think he'll take a loss for Damian Priest because they are actually really good friends in real life. I think he'll take a loss for him. If he does lose, I think it'll because of interference specifically from Dom. Like Dom will somehow make him lose, and Damian, it'll be a disqualification, whatever. But Damian,
He'll get the chancla off of Ray and beat the crap out of him.
He'll take the chancla and then start beating Bad Bunny with chancla.
I really want to see that, Ray just beating the crap out of Dom with that sandal.
Ray has to come out with it in his entrance. Like he has to be holding the chancla. It makes a lot of sense.
That's my hope is that it's just Bunny and Damian in the ring, like by themselves, and then JD comes in and starts doing their shenanigans, and then LWO. That's what I want. I want some gang warfare.
I think we're gonna see Rhea pull some sort of move on Bad Bunny too. I don't know what it's gonna be, but she'll do something.
I don't know if Rhea or Zelina will do it because they had a match that night. They might, right? Because I haven't seen a lot of this since I've been watching. I think if they've had a match the previous night, they're there. If that makes sense. Like they'll do another match. They could. I mean, Rhea and Zelina are pretty fit, so they could do it.
And Judgment Day's so tight, right, as a group, so it makes sense.
Yeah, because you still have Finn and Dom, then you would have Santos Escobar. I guess they don't have, because the LWO is Santos Escobar and Zelina Vega and Ray, right? Also, you'd have Ray and Santos.
No, LWO has 3 dudes, Ray and Zelina, so they're a bigger group.
Right.
Yeah, I can't remember all their names, but one of them's Joaquin something, and then Escobar, and then there's another dude, and then Zelina, and then Ray's the additional. Well,
so I think just for that match, you probably would see Ray and Escobar, and then Finn and Dom. You wouldn't see the extra members because obviously Rhea and Zelina will have fought earlier that night. But yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. I do think Bunny, I think you get some great heel heat if Damian wins. I think if it's the main event, Bunny wins because I don't see why you would do it as the main event and have Bunny lose. It would just it's not Roman, right?
It's not Roman. And you know what? It's kind of nice that we don't have Roman on the card for this one. I think it's really important because I think it's gonna and the tag match. You know, the 6-man tag match should not be the main card because I don't want to see another bloodline ending.
No.
The only thing I'll ask you, and I know we've gone quite high on time today. The one thing I'm curious is what match opens the show?
One of the women's belts.
Really?
Maybe you open with Rhea and Zelina because she's from Puerto Rico. And then you close it with Bunny and Damian.
I was kind of leaning on the Omos and Seth being the opening match, just because I think
like night 2 of WrestleMania.
Because it's going to be really fast. I think it won't be a long match.
If that happens, we know it's going to be a bad card because that's what happened at WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's what happened at WrestleMania.
No, I think you open. I think honestly, you open with Zelina and Rhea. It's a title match, so that's nice. And then the co-main should be Brock and Cody. And then the main event should be Bunny and Priest because that's 2 people from Puerto Rico in a main event plus the LWO, right? Like it makes too much sense to not be, and it's a street fight. Who doesn't want to see a street fight? Honestly, it's the only stipulation on the card.
That's true.
So I think that's how you do it, and I think Bunny wins because it'd be a nice little Hisacadian destroyer on Damian, which would be amazing. I'm hoping they pull it off. That's one of my favorite moves. But yeah, so that's we'll wrap it up there. Like you said, we've talked quite a bit and even threw in an extra topic of who you should like in the wrestling world, like who you want. But please subscribe, please leave a thumbs up. And as I always say, my beautifully bearded friend, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you at the next one.